Okay, we're all set? Madam Clerk, are we ready to roll? Okay, so it is moved by Councillor welcome everyone. It is moved by Councillor Karen, second by Councillor Strength. Be it resolved that the council agenda as presented on February 25th, 2025 be approved as circulated. Please vote. And that carries, thank you.
Hold on.
Nope.
Peter, you keep pressing to talk. Okay. Nope, it's okay, we're done.
Okay. Sorry, and that carries, did it? Great, thank you. And we have disclosures of pecuniary interest today, council, anyone? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Johnston, I understand you have the land acknowledgement statement to read today? Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the First Peoples, who for thousands of years before us were and are still the keepers and caretakers of this land, where we now live and work, and in particular the Chippewas of Rama, Wata Mohawk First Nations, and the Moon River Métis. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. We recognize all the generations of Indigenous people and their historic connection to this place, and we are grateful for the opportunity to gather here at this time. Miigwech.
Okay. So, this afternoon, there are two public meetings scheduled for two zoning bylaw amendments. Application number ZA01-2025 for West, and application number ZA03-2025 for, I'm going to do my very best at this, Bay Ramugla. Is that? Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks for correcting me. Could you say it one more time? Baramoglu. Okay, thank you for that. Apologize for that. Thank you. The Planning Act requires that a public meeting be held before council decides to pass a zoning bylaw amendment. The public meeting serves two purposes. First, to present to council and the public the details and background to the proposal, and second, to receive comments from the public and agencies before council makes a decision. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the public meeting. The Manager of Planning Services, Adam Ager, will advise to council as to when, how, and to whom notice of public meeting was circulated. Staff will then advise of the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning amendment and provide any additional information that is relevant to the application. Staff will further summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the applicant will be requested to make a presentation, followed by questions or presentations from the public, either in favor or against the proposal. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, staff, or anyone giving presentations. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment will then be considered by council later this afternoon. If anyone from the public in the council chambers would like to request notification of the decision of any application, please complete the form provided on the table at the back and return to the same location. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to advise when, how, and to whom notice of the public meetings were circulated. Mr. Ager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of the public meetings concerning the proposed zoning bylaw amendments were sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, that's 400 feet, of the property subject to the proposed bylaw and emailed to applicable agencies. Included within the notices was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposal, a site plan, and a key map showing the location of the property in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13.
Thank you. It is important to note that should council pass any bylaws this afternoon, there is a 20-day appeal period during which time the applicant, the municipality, and certain public bodies as defined by the Planning Act may appeal the decision of council. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commenced. Also, in the event there is an appeal, and in order to be kept advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing, members of the public must request and be sent a copy of council's decision on the application. Before I kick off public meeting number 1, I just wanted to recognize that today, in recognition of tomorrow's Anti-Bullying Pink Shirt Day, we as council decided to show our support and show our, I guess, not support for bullying, but certainly that Town of Gravenhurst takes bullying very seriously, and that is not tolerated, and bullying and harassment have no place in our society. So I just wanted to recognize and thank council for participating today. So with that, I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA01-2025 for West. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject property is located at the corner of Baseline and Art Crisp Road. The property is designated rural area in the official plan and is zoned rural. The subject property is well vegetated with a mix of mature trees and is generally level. The property is currently being developed with a detached dwelling to the north on the location of a lot which is proposed to be severed. The remainder of the lands are all currently vacant. A wetland and watercourse feature have also been confirmed on the south central portion of the property. More specifically, you'll see on the next sketches here, the hatched area. As part of this application, an environmental impact statement was required due to deer wintering habitat, and during that environmental impact statement, a new wetland feature was actually identified that wasn't previously mapped, really highlighting the importance and significance of undertaking these studies. So the application was submitted in order to rezone the entire balance of the property from rural to rural residential 5 to recognize the intent of their use for rural residential purposes, but also to implement environmental protection zone as well for now this newly identified wetland feature. In addition to that, based on the recommendations from the environmental impact study, a special provisions been established as well for the lots affected by the wetland feature. So that would be the retained lot in the center there, highlighted in green, as well as severed lot 2 and 3, which are at the bottom of the screen down here. And that's the special provision would be a minimum setback of 0.0 meters for buildings and structures from the environmental protection zone, and a minimum setback of 15 meters for septic systems and leaching beds from the environmental protection zone. Consent applications BO1, BO2, and BO3 were submitted concurrently with this application in order to permit the creation of these new rural residential lots and the retention of 1 rural residential lot for a total of 4 lots that all comply with the regulations of the RR5 zone. These consent applications were conditionally approved at the February 17th Committee of Adjustment meeting. With respect to agency comments, the chief building official had no objection and indicated that septic location and suitability on the property will need to be assessed and confirmed through the building permit process. The manager of revenue had no comments. The infrastructure technologist, no objections, and did indicate that entrance permits would be required for the newly created lots. The deputy fire chief, no objections, subject to Ontario Building Code and Fire Code requirements. The District of Muskoka, no objections, subject to the appropriate development control techniques being used to conserve valuable conifer thermal cover for deer wintering and feeding areas, as well as species at risk and the wetland. And with that respect, the implementation of the environmental protection zone through this application would be one of those development control techniques. And also in the conditional approval at Committee of Adjustment, there was also a consent agreement condition put in place to address the other concerns. Lastly, CN Rail had no objections, but did provide a list of conditions that were listed in the staff report. Again, these conditions were also captured within that consent agreement that I previously mentioned through the Committee of Adjustment process. Now moving through site photos, this photo just shows the dwelling that is currently under construction, which would be on the northernmost lot. This is then looking north up Baseline Road. You can see there abutting lands on the other side of the road are well separated from the subject lands. This is then looking south down Baseline Road towards the location of the other lots. This just shows sight lines, and in this case, it's a clear straight shot with no obstructions. This is then looking into the retained lot, so the center lot on the property, looking west. This would be then looking into severed lot 3 from Art Crisp Road, and this lot would be the lot that has the wetland feature at the rear of the property. And then this is looking into severed lot 2 north, and this is where the wetland kind of consumes the bulk of the property, but there has been a development envelope demonstrated to the satisfaction of meeting all zoning requirements. This is then looking at the sight lines down Art Crisp Road and in the other direction, which is southeast down Art Crisp Road. As a result, it's staff's opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy planning statement, conforms to the official plan, is appropriate, and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Egger. I will now ask for comments by the applicants or their agent.
Madam Mayor, Rick McCann, 1038 Cowbell Lane, Severn Bridge, Ontario, P0E1 Norman 0. I'm agent for the applicant, and I will be available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. For members of the viewing audience, we have no members of the public here, so we will not be calling for that. Council, are there any questions to the applicant or the manager of planning services? Councillor Morphy?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. What I'm confused about are the hash marks. The page 3, due to the EIS, they identify a 15-meter buffer, and yet we're asking for a minimum setback of 0 meters for buildings and structures. So where the hashtags end, you can actually have the back wall of a building there and literally step onto the environmentally protected out your back door, or is that inner dot the thank you. Okay, withdrawn.
Mr. Egger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Morphy, perhaps Madam Clerk could just pop the presentation back up, and I'll use the site plan to describe the situation. So what the environmental impact study had included the suitable buffer area for the dwellings in the hatched area, and then where it specifically talks about a 15-meter buffer for septics, that's this dashed line, and the septic system in this case is in that corner outside of that area. So you're absolutely correct. The dwelling could be right up to that hatched area, which includes the buffer, and then the septic has to be outside the dashed line.
Councillor Johnston?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Egger. This is not particular to this application. I know the consultant very well, I know the property, but it just, I'm going to use it as an example, my question is that there are a lot of significant environmental issues in this application, and hence the need for the environmental protection zone. My question, Mr. Egger, is how often do we impose an environmental protection zone? That's number one. And number two, are there any instances that you can recall in which there was a somewhat or major violation of that zone years later? My question is simply that once we put that EP zone in, is there any monitoring from time to time to make sure that the requirements of the EP zone are being followed? I mean, it's just, you multiply this property by numbers, protecting the environment, and I just wondered how stringent that protection is. Thank you.
Mr. Egger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Johnson. Great question. So again, for the chronology of this instance, the deer wintering habitat layer was what really kicked off the need for the environmental impact study. Then once that study was done and they go out on site and review the property, they identified that there's actually another significant feature here that was not previously mapped for. So the process works. We now know there's a wetland on this property, and the technical expert recommended that the environmental protection zone be laid onto this property with recommendations of what the setback should be, in which case the zoning is now going to be implying those. So the technical expert, being the biologist that did the report, is satisfied that development can happen. Notwithstanding that, through the consent application process, one of the conditions of consent is actually that site plan control also be used, because the site plan control bylaw allows for lands within a certain distance to a wetland also be subject to site plan control. So there's a number of development control techniques to ensure that only development can happen within the site that is identified on this plan. And any other development beyond that would then be a contravention of the site plan control agreement, and then enforcement would happen from there.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Agar, are there any recommendations or comments to bring to the attention of council as a result of these proceedings?
Thank you, Your Worship. As detailed in the staff report, staff would recommend the application be approved.
The bylaw will be considered by council later this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be concluded. Public meeting number 2, I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA03-2025 for Baramoglu and Greer Baramoglu. I will now ask the manager of planning services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject property is located on Red Shell Road. The property is designated rural area and waterfront area in part in the official plan, and you can see this is a large property, so a portion of the lands are in the waterfront area within 150 meters of the lake at the north end, and then the balance of the property is within the rural area designation, and that's really the area that we're going to be focusing on here as part of this application. It's presently zoned residential waterfront, again at the north, aligning with the portion that touches the water, environmental protection in part, and rural. The portion of this property that is subject to this application is currently vacant and well vegetated with a mix of trees. Topography is relatively flat at the very front, but does slope upwards to the northeast and was defined by a noticeable bedrock outcropping moving towards the rear of the area in question. So this application focuses on this rectangle here, which is identified on the plan as Lot 3. This is another instance of a zoning bylaw amendment application that was the result of a concurrent consent application. So consent applications B04, B05, and B06 2025 were submitted concurrently along with the zoning bylaw amendment before us this afternoon to create 3 new rural residential lots and retain 1 lot with frontage on Southwood Road and Red Shell Road, the 3rd severed lot, which is subject to this zoning amendment. The consent applications were conditionally approved at the February 21st Committee of Adjustment meeting, one of those conditions being that Lot 3 be rezoned from rural to rural residential 5. The lot area and frontage as shown on screen do meet the provisions of the RR5 zone. With respect to comments, the chief building official, no objections, but did indicate that the septic location and suitability for the proposed 3rd lot, so the property we're dealing with here, be assessed and confirmed. The manager of revenue, no comments or objections, nor did the infrastructure technologist. The deputy fire chief provided no objections, subject to Ontario Building Code and Fire Code regulations being met. The Mulger Lake Cottagers Association, again, this property does go all the way up to Mulger Lake, had no objections to the proposed application, as again, this is not in proximity really to the waterfront area. The District of Muskoka had no objections, subject to conditions, which were included in the staff report and brought forward into the necessary conditions of approval at the Committee of Adjustment meeting. Then moving along to site photos. This is a neighboring property with a dwelling and small barn. For context, the proposed lot to be rezoned is on the right-hand side and can loosely be identified by the tree line starting here. This is then looking north into the proposed severed lot that's to be rezoned. Again, looking through, you can start to see that topography and that bedrock outcropping as you move through the tree cover. This is then looking northeast into that property. This is looking west down Red Shell Road and Southwood, just again depicting sight lines as detailed in the infrastructure technologist. No objections or concerns with respect to sight lines. This is then looking east down Southwood towards the proposed severed lot on Red Shell. Again, no concerns from a sightline perspective. As detailed in the staff report, it's staff's opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial planning statement, conforms to the official plan, is appropriate, and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. I will now ask for comments by the agent Ryan Lloyd, who has pre-registered to participate electronically. Ryan, welcome.
Good afternoon, and through the mayor. My name is Ryan Lloyd, planner with Planscape, 104 Kimberley Avenue, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L 1Z8. I'm here to represent the applicants and owners of 1025 Red Shell Road. So thank you to Mr. Clark, first of all, for all of his help through this application, and for Mr. Ager's report and presentation today. I believe a lot of the concerns of this application were discussed in detail last week at the Committee of Adjustment meeting. And today's application will rezone one of the new lots from rural to residential rural as one of those conditions. So out of respect of your time and an effort not to duplicate today's presentation, I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. As previously mentioned, there are no, well, I guess now we do have a member of the public who spoke to the other application, so I trust that you're not speaking to this. Okay. All right, Council, are there any questions for the for our manager of planning services or for the agent? Councillor Morphy?
Thank you to you, Madam Mayor. Is it subject, sorry, to Manager Ager, is it subject to a site plan because it has some residential waterfront? Like, I'm not seeing any vegetation identified or limited to whether it can be removed, and I'm seeing a lot of trees and forests on that property. So do we have any control over vegetation remaining in place?
Mr. Ager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Morphy. In this instance, there is no site plan control that we're able to implement. It's enough of a distance from the waterfront area that it's not captured within that, and it's also not captured with any within any distance that we can impose it to a wetland feature. So no, there is no site plan control in this regard.
Okay, Council, anybody else? Mr. Ager, as a result of these proceedings, is there any recommendations you'd like to make to Council?
Your Worship, as detailed in the staff report, staff would recommend the application be approved.
The clerk just asked if we needed a recess. And my next line is, the bylaw will be considered by Council now. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be concluded. So, it's moved by Councillor Johnston and seconded by Councillor Jorgensen, who is out there somewhere online. Oh,
He's up there.
yeah. So he is out there. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be read, passed, and engrossed into the bylaw book. Bylaw number 2025-13, zoning west Artcrisp Road and Baseline Road. Bylaw number 2025-14, zoning Barramuglo and Greer Barramuglo, Red Shell Road, Southwood Road. Council, I'll ask you to vote, please. And that carries. Thank you. It is moved by Counselor Morphy, second by Counselor Robinson. Be it resolved, the minutes of the council meeting dated January 28, 2025 be approved as circulated. All in favor, please vote. And thank you, that carries. It is moved by Counselor Strength, second by Counselor Johnston. Be it resolved that the bylaw number 2025-15 to confirm the council meeting held on February 25th, 2025 be passed. All in favor, please vote. Oh, it's me. Okay. And that carries, thank you. And a motion to adjourn. Counselor Cairns and Counselor Robinson, please vote. Okay, so that's